So I'm delighted this morning to be with Jay Howard. Feel free to join us if you come online as well. As I say, we have an audience member as well today, which is great to see. One of our youngest members online. So the online community, Jay. So look, it's a really, I was going to say tricky time. I'd like to use a few expletives, but I'm not going to in front of our
Yeah.
youngest member. Um, so the market has changed. That's fairly obvious to anyone. I suppose I say it's obvious to anyone. It's obvious to anyone in London. It may not be obvious to people outside of London as much. But first of all, do you want to just introduce who you are? I keep getting your title wrong. I'm so used to saying Auction House London Manager. The person who's replaced you, if anyone could replace you, must be a bit upset with me.
No, I don't know. I don't know if they've replaced me with anybody, but yeah. So I was auction manager at Auction House London for 6 years. For about 12 years prior to that, I was a trader, and for 6 years of those trading years was doing it through auction, and the rest was all off market transactions. Yeah, so I'm a property expert, co-author of Before the Hammer Falls with my business partner Piotr Rusnek. And now we're doing Your Property Auctions, which is a consulting company, consulting people on how to buy and how to sell at auction. A couple of educational bits in there, but for the most part, it's consultancy. So yeah, really exciting times.
So Jay, just to clarify, how long have you been trading for?
12 years.
12 years, okay. And that's a mixture, am I right in saying, in commercial and residential, so not just purely residential?
Yeah, it's I would say it's close to a 50-50, maybe with the commercial taking a marginal lead, I think.
And geographical spread is purely London, southeast, or it's a little bit wider?
I've invested throughout the country. I haven't really invested strongly in Wales. I just don't understand the economy well enough, or the dynamics there.
When you
I've
say
bought a
that,
couple.
sorry,
Yeah.
Jay. When you say that, because when you say Wales, the name which comes to my mind is Mark King. So I'm
Yeah,
sure you've
and
heard of him.
absolutely it should. Yeah.
Yeah. So what do dynamics mean to you? So in layman's terms.
There are very basic metrics. So decision points that you want to be making based on information and knowledge and experience that you have. And I think it's one of the main reasons why I haven't really invested in Devon or Cornwall, because I don't understand. I don't have the experience to understand how those economies work well. And if you're investing in commercial property, you have to understand the economies, where the business is, where the trade is, and how all these different things work together, and how they all impact your all your buying decisions. So I bought in Scotland once, a bank, I think a Lloyd's TSB, in Renfrewshire. I can't pronounce half the things I bought, but so yeah. So I've pretty much everywhere. The bulk of my investments have been Bristol, Birmingham, Liverpool, Leeds, West Sussex, East Sussex, London, Greater London, pretty much. A few bits in Hampshire.
Jay, tomorrow morning, a little bit of a plug for my own event tomorrow morning at my online event. Look, this is one of the questions which Jack suggested to cover tomorrow, but I will ask today. It's about market predictions. I think it's very hard, personally, myself. But in terms of market predictions, where do you think we're going to go? And I understand it's so hard to answer that question, but Jack must think it's feasible as well.
Is it hard to answer that question? If you understand how economy works, you know that there is a rise and fall in economy.
Jay, that's good. We've got Joanna who's just joined us.
Johanna, my favourite person. How are you? I don't know if she can leave a message, but it's great having you on board, Joanna. I think with regards to your question, Brendan, if you're focusing on what are the market predictions, I've been saying for 2 years ish that there's a market crash on the way. I don't say that because I'm a mind reader or anything like that, but every 8 to 12 years there's a market crash. It's been 12 years since 2008.
Mm.
You know, this is all expected. Whether it's coronavirus has added some more complexity to it, whether it's the fallout from Brexit, whether it's multiple other things, whether it's the fact that, you know, we haven't really left quantitative easing since 2008. You know, the interest rates haven't gone up in that time. In fairness, we're not in a practical recession yet because we haven't had 2 quarters in decline. But we, again, although we've been growing, we haven't had any real sustainable growth because the easing is still in place. If the government was to take the easing away, we would have been in recession from easily for the last 10 years, easily. So it comes down to what kind of recovery have we had outside of the property industry. So obviously we had a recovery in house prices and property prices in London, and actually probably stronger recovery rates regionally than London, stronger and more sustainable, especially in Liverpool, Manchester, Leeds, places like that. So market predictions expect instability, and expect a lot of challenges. And if you're right-minded, you're going to enjoy those kind of challenges, like your wife going away and leaving you to look after the 4-month-old baby, which is fine, but it's a challenge. You're not screaming, which is great.
So Jay, trading is going to be obviously more difficult in this market. I was talking.
Is it?
Well, okay.
So, well, you have to understand that your ability to trade is predicated on your ability to buy wealth. If you can, the banks haven't really come out and said too much about mortgage payment holidays. You know, the government hasn't really come out and said how they're going to protect tenants well enough yet, which means you're going to have a large proportion of the population that are probably self-isolating like I'm doing today. And they're not going to be able to either generate income or pay their debts or mortgages or rents and things like that. When stuff like that starts happening, you get pinch points where people have to make quick decisions either to sell or to exit and do things like that. And that's the power of the trader. If the trader can come along and solve that person's problem and buy that property with enough of a discount to make it worthwhile, and then be able to add some kind of value. Because remember, you're not talking about a flipping artist who just buys at X and then trades it straight at Y. If you're a trader, then you're normally adding some kind of value in the interim.
You see, I think it's an important point, Jay. So you see a slight difference between a flipper and a trader?
Absolutely. If you go back pre-2008, a flipper was somebody who exchanged on a property subject to X, Y, and Z with an assignable contract, and within a month, 2 weeks, 10 days, 3 months, had flipped it onto somebody else at a higher price, purely because the market had changed, normally because the property prices had increased. That's a flipper. That's someone who just takes a contract and flips it to another person. A trader is someone who takes the property, buys the property, does something to it, sometimes doesn't do something to it, and then trades it onto somebody else. But they have to be the owner in order to trade. Otherwise, all you're doing is contract flipping.
All you're doing is contract living, did you say?
Flipping.
Okay, interesting. So
they're interchangeable terms because a lot of people.
I interchange them, to be fair.
Yeah, and it's fine. A lot of people do, but if you're talking to, like, if you talk to someone like Mark or maybe even Ross Harper, who's a good trader, and a couple of other guys who trade, if they're trading something. If you don't have something, then you're just flipping, and there's nothing wrong with that, because before you came up with the term and all the training for sources, Um, that's what flippers were doing. They were sourcing properties at X, adding their piece of the pie, and then selling it for Y, and then the bit in between was their profit, and that's all they were doing. And there's nothing wrong with that, because it takes properties that are unseen in the market, so off market, and puts them on the market, enabling more people to buy.
Jay, I love your optimism. I'm
not optimistic. I'm scared. But the only way to address that is with how can we carry on? Because whether we like it or not, the sun is going to set and rise again in the morning. The earth is going to continue to spin on its axis, and you have a choice. You can either survive or thrive. And the only way to thrive is to have that positive outset, look for the opportunities, solve the problems, and try and remain active. Because if you don't, then, God knows what happens. I don't know what will happen.
Look, some people might be listening to this call, Jay, and thinking, how can we get more involved in trading? Maybe they're going to change strategy. I'm not advising them to change strategy either. So while we've got the commercial, I thought we were going to go on commercial break there for a moment. My commercial break would be about the post-commercial summit, which is tomorrow. So really delighted at 9 a.m., not 10 a.m. I prefer 10. But my choice of timing was either 9 or 11 from Jack. I said 11's a bit too late, so let's stick with 9. So that was my commercial advert there. My monthly events are still running online. 26th of this month. I'm delighted that we've got Rod Turner, who's on the panel. We've got the likes of Daryl Norkert as well from Lendwell. So Daryl, as people keep saying to me, and I'm not surprised because I've known him for a number of years, very, very knowledgeable, Daryl is, and he certainly is. And
I met him on the judging panel for the Property Investor Awards. I'd heard of him, but the first time I'd met him was when we were in the judging room going through all the applicants, and it's very impressive, like the way he can break down the deal and look at the risk and things like that. Obviously he's got the background for it, but it was very impressive, and I've got to know him a fair bit since then. He's joined the Partners in Property London community, and it's great having him there. That's a powerhouse panel with just those two on there. Rod and Daryl. Do you need anyone else?
I have to admit, I'm trying to remember the other names, but Ria is joining us. Good. Ria, if you have any questions, feel free to put them into the type box. I don't know how many more minutes I can keep Jay online for, though. So,
as long as she's not screaming, I think we have some time.
Let me just send a message to Ria. Feel free to send over a question. So look, Jay, I was going through about the challenges of being a trader, challenges of all property strategies as well. I don't think there's going to be any strategy which is not affected. They're all going to be affected in one way or another. I do read people saying it's business as usual. Maybe it is outside of London. In London, you can see it's certainly not business as usual. You've got schools closing, I think.
Well, you say that about maybe being easier outside of London, but I think you have to understand how diverse a community there are outside London. You've got some extremely very rural areas. You've got aged populations in certain areas. You have areas where a lot of the tenant class are either on like a universal credit or low income housing. You normally have people who are buying income producing assets there on a good yield, but 6 months of this kind of market puts a lot of those people under pressure. The differential you have with London is the capital value of the property is slightly higher, so the banks take more of a view in terms of how much equity can be eaten up. in 6 months of a mortgage holiday or a tenant not paying rent and the landlord having trouble servicing the debt. When you head that far outside of London, where the average purchase price can be anywhere between 20,000 if you're up in the northeast, or 60 to 80,000 if you're in the northwest, coming down slightly, even to the 120,000 pound mark. There are challenges. They're all different shapes and sizes. I don't think one region is going to have an easier time than another over it. I think there are challenges throughout the country.
That's interesting. So even outside of London, which, you know, what one of its major industries is tourism, is going to be affected. But you say it's a little bit too simplistic just to think about the industries. There's a lot more at stake in terms of cash flow, stroke capital appreciation, which generally London is.
You have commerce outside of London. People seem to forget that for some strange reason. There is massive commerce.
Jay,
was that
sorry.
Sam Norris I just saw there? Oh.
No, you can read it as well. Well, I didn't realise. I thought it. So that's good. You continue your point, and then we can. Oh.
Yeah. So you have to understand that there is trade and commerce outside of London. You know, you have massive industry in the north, which is, you know, based on the troubles that surfaced in 2008. Sorry, 1 second. What's the problem? What's the problem? What's the beef? What's the beef? I'm tired. You tired? 1 second. You tired, Bubs? Come on then. Oh no, I don't want to cut.
So look, Jay, are you still there? Oh,
I'm still here.
Yeah.
I'm still
okay.
Here.
Good.
Oh, there she is. She just likes the camera. You want
to? So, look.
Okay, I was making a really good point about you know, trading and business. You know, you have places like in Staffordshire and Shropshire where you've got like the Jaguar, you know, where they're building the cars in the UK, and you have things like that. And
that's same with Toyota and Nissan as well.
Toyota and Nissan, but I think they're somewhere slightly different. But you know, you kind of have to understand that it's a domino effect, especially something like having to self-isolate, or businesses who aren't set up to you know, operate from have a work from home policy. You know, retailers. That's a very difficult thing for them to do, right? I was on the Partners in Property London WhatsApp group yesterday, and there must have been maybe in the space of 5 or 6 hours 120 comments of actually people giving really, really good common sense. I think actually Rod was one of the main contributors, so if he's going to be on your panel, that's going to be very interesting, about how the retail space may end up changing after this, because change only comes about when people see that maybe something isn't working correctly, or there are pitfalls in how they operate. And I think this coronavirus or COVID-19, whichever way you want to put it, is highlighting a lot of things that need to be addressed.
Well, I've already read that, for example, Leon, which is run by John Vincent and Henry Dimbleby, they're changing strategy themselves. They may not call it a change of strategy, but they're saying we've got this space. People aren't really coming into our shops as such, as much into our cafes. However, people still need food. So I didn't quite understand the story, whether they're going to actually deliver food from their premises or they're going to have a little supermarket in the actual cafe. I'm not sure which way it's going to work, but
both would work. And maybe they're listening to this, Brendan.
Yeah,
maybe they're going to do both. Who knows?
So so that's, you know, I think retailers are already understanding things are changing, and I'm sure there's other examples in London particularly as well. So Jay, I just want to address Ria's point. Do you mind covering it?
No, absolutely. Yeah, of course.
It's what Sam Norris is one of the senior, bit of plug, even though Sam's not on this call, he still gets a mention. So Sam is one of the senior finance brokers at Bond Finance. He mentions lenders are increasing interest rates next week, or that's his belief anyway. Why? So what would you say to Ria on that?
Well, I think with the change from the Bank of England, I think the banks were, it's not feasible for the banks to follow that suit downward. And it's similar to the point that I made earlier on in terms of we still haven't really exited quantitative easing from the 2008 crash, because everything's been going down at inflation, all to kind of maintain a status quo. That band-aid needs to be ripped off. One of the reasons why I believe that the lenders are going to increase their interest rates is because they need to. You know, you're not getting anything through savings, and money has been the cheapest it's been for about 30 years. And something has to change. Pardon you. And something has to change. And I think interest rates is a rather subtle way to test out the marketplace. And I imagine they're probably going to do it for some of the more vanilla kind of financial instruments they have out there. I don't think they're going to go. I think the development finance would be a very interesting route for them to go down, but I don't see that sustainable because there's so much pressure to do developments. And at the moment, you know, people complain about being 10, 15%, stuff like that, but you go back 20 years and you'd be lucky to get within 10% of that. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a case of them probably deciding how they're going to distribute that rise if they do it. But you know, Sam's got his ear to the ground, and you know, he does his what's it called, the game of, what's it called, the Game of Funds or the Game of Finance, whatever it's called. It's like Game of Thrones, but his own little thing.
Oh, I didn't know that. I have to ask him that tomorrow. So
it's a podcast.
I think his podcast. Okay.
Game of Finance or Game of Fun. Anyway, it's a really cool play on words, but he's always kind of posting stuff, and he's always paying attention to like the mood and the motion and everything that's going on with a certain group of lenders. So he probably has some good insight. But it'll be interesting to see actually tomorrow what Daryl says at that point. If you were to,
I'm not sure we've got Daryl on the line tomorrow. So Daryl's one of the few who are missing from that call tomorrow at 9 a.m. Hopefully, I will be on that call at 9 a.m. Hopefully, Zoom will be as well, because I noticed this platform, people talk about it, but there's a certain bandwidth, I believe, or too many people using this online software now, so which is an issue. Obviously, there's other providers as well. I think other people possibly look at other providers as well. So just to reiterate, tomorrow should be myself, fingers crossed, Jack Jiggins, Aaron Yahara, and I'm just thinking Alex Hearn. So it's interesting, we haven't heard from chartered surveyors. So Ria, Joanna, and others, if anyone else joins us, I really do value contributions about who you'd like to hear over the next week or two. I say the next week or two. I'm hoping maybe it will be a little bit longer than a week or two. Maybe it will be a month or two, or who knows. So, you know, if there's people you want to hear who may not necessarily be at my events on a regular basis, or who may be as well. So just a commercial plug, on Monday at 2 p.m. I am with Daryl online, and then on Wednesday with Richard Thorpe. I think both times are nice, comfortable times, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Jay, I just want to say massive thanks to you, Exit Strategy. So Jay loves Exit Strategy, so there was one Exit Strategy there. Massive thanks to Ria and Joanna for joining us. You're going to see me a lot more using, as long as Zoom keeps up with the demand, using this platform or whatever platform. But as I say, using online going forward. Thanks, Ria. You asked. Ria points out Manish, who will be presenting for me very shortly. Manish Kataria says property went down. I haven't seen these figures. 19% in 2008. This year expect similar effect. You can see the notes, Jay, can't you? I think
No,
as well.
I didn't see that, but no, he's
That
absolutely
just
correct.
popped up.
Yeah, so he's absolutely correct. In some instances, depending on the area, the property went down, but I think on average it went down 19%. There's been some steady house growth in London for the last 6 or 7 years, and actually that's become more stunted maybe since 2016. So for the last 4 years, it started to slow down again. I would say from 2008, the height of the market was 2012 to 2014. Started to cool off 2015, stamp duty and legislation changes to 2016, and then Brexit, and then everything else that's kind of unfurled in the last 4 years have had some effect. But I would say regionally, some areas have done phenomenally well. Manchester, Liverpool, Leeds, Birmingham, all have gone up in standard house price. But can you expect after another crash to see a similar drop? Absolutely. And you can't really argue with Manish because it's his ability to see like the whole picture from a holistic view and from a data-driven view is something that I really like. Got a lot of respect for Manish, and I'd probably find myself agreeing with him in that. That's very much a sentiment that I could get on board with. I could see happening.
Joanna, you can read the notes. Joanna wants to know more about J and Piot's B romance. Okay. So I presume that's more about your next book coming out. Can we say more about that, or we're not allowed to?
We're still development stages on the book, but it's obviously the first book was very much an introduction to auctions, and we made that very much like this is how everything works. These are the things you need to know in order to start being successful at auction. The idea behind the second book is that we're probably going to point out all of the bad things that can happen, all of the mistakes that we've seen happen, and have real life horror stories from people who have been to auction and made those mistakes. So the second book is going to be, if you don't want to listen to what happened to the first book, this is what can happen in the second book. So, but hopefully that builds a whole picture around it. But I think at the end of every chapter there, we're going to have a success story about someone who made that situation work, how they made that situation work. And if we don't have a success story for that, we will talk about how we would solve that problem to make it not an issue anymore. So how we would add value by solving that issue. Yeah.
I'm looking forward to learn auction trade more from you, Jay. Look, in terms of people finding more about yourself, Jay, Partners in Property is one way. I'm sure we're going to be online at some point fairly soon. I'm trying to keep it on a regular basis so people know every Monday I've got Daryl, certainly for this coming week, and every Wednesday we've got Richard Thorpe as well, and maybe I can bring Jay in on a more regular basis while we go through this coronavirus or COVID-19. People got two different names for it. It's a bit like flipping and trading, people using different names interchangeably, and maybe they shouldn't, but that's what happens. Jay, I just want to say massive thanks for taking time out today. So, Ria and Jonah, do you have any more questions? I'm sure the number of people who are going to be on these calls will grow. So in many respects, you've got first advantage over those who are going to join us at a later time. No? Okay, brilliant. Jay, I look forward to seeing you very soon, whether that's online, which for most of us is online at the moment, rather than in a room setting. So massive thanks, and I'm sure I'll come back, and possibly if you have time next week, maybe on Thursday, or depending on your schedule, then we can catch up again, possibly at my preferred time, which is 10 o'clock rather than 9 o'clock, as you
Yeah.
you
I'm
know.
not. I don't look good at 9 o'clock in the morning, so 10 works fine
10.
for me, Brendan.
Brilliant. So if we can get something there, really do appreciate it. Massive thanks, Jay, for your time this morning. Ria, I know you mentioned Manish a few times. I will get Manish to do if I can persuade him, an open call Zoom as well, so we can go through some of the figures you mentioned as well. So do watch this space. And if there's people you'd like me to invite, also, thank you.